everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast based on writers sitting around drinking coffee or wine and talking about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your hosts today are David Welsh and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 44, Interview with Jeff Barry. You know how for the past 43 episodes, we've been telling you all year that you are writers, or at least you could be writers. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Barry, or Alexander Lahaud-Davenier in the SCA. Jeff started out a techie, flirted perilously with satire, and ended up on Broadway. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Happy to be here.
Jeff and I have known each other for about 35 years. He graduated same university as me with a degree in electrical engineering. And then he ran off to New York to join the theater, and then off to England to study medieval cooking. Meanwhile, in New York, he started writing plays and cookbooks. Tell us about your steps. It's kind of a terribly interesting way to end up being deeply involved in a creative industry when you started so deeply, well, mates just say not creative in perception.
Well, it's kind of, you said we could go down rabbit holes. Here we go. So, yes, my undergraduate degree is electrical engineering, but it had a strong computer science focus, and I ended up programming mostly for the National Center for Atmospheric Research. But what I ended up doing was systems administration in Unix/Linux/Nix systems. And there was a very interesting article that somebody wrote, probably in the late 80s or early 90s, where he noted that a lot of Splatnix programmers thought in literary idiom, and it's a type of computer programming or operating system scripting that attracts a certain literary mindset. So although I was working in a technical field, my background really had come out from that sort of literary mindset and the theater. So it wasn't as big a leap as it might sound at first blush.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, we knew each other very, very well through college, and yet I didn't see you participating in any theaters. I mean, you talked about having done some in high school, but it seemed to kind of disappear entirely for a few years there.
It did. So, flashing back to high school, where in fact we first met, I was very active in theater in high school, and also active in the SCA. And then it was time for college, and something had to give, and what gave was the theater. So it was the engineering and working hard to get that degree, and then the theater fell by the wayside, and the SCA sort of took up the slack of social life.
Did you get the, oh shit, I need to do something that's going to earn real money, and that's how you got into the technical things, or?
Not so much. My dad is an electrical engineer, and in fact, I ended up taking electromagnetic fields and waves from the same guy who taught him electromagnetic fields and waves some 20 years earlier. And
I remember the delight of having a temp job one spring break and being able to call you up and say, "Hey, Jeff, I know what your dad does."
well, and there was also at a college, there was also a weird SCA connection, because one of our friends in the SCA was the lead technician at the electrical engineering department. And I was coming back from an SCA event in his van and missed a midterm because we got trapped south of Raton Pass in February. And was able to say, no, Professor, look, this guy who works for you can vouch for the fact that I didn't just blow it off. I was stuck in New Mexico.
And I do agree with you for a piece on it. I mean, I was disappointed with Windows later after Unix had such magnificent error messages as, I can't find the file you're looking for. I'm sorry. As opposed to Windows that had, syntax error, core dump.
Yeah. Well, and so the people who were responsible for doing a lot of the early Unix error messaging and stuff like that had a very literary bent. And if you look at some of the shell scripting stuff that you can do, it's got a certain poetry and charm to it. Programmers talk about elegance in code, and it's really hard to do that if what you're doing is dragging and dropping in Visual Basic. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I got quite enough sneer in my voice on that.
I heard
Visual
it. We heard it.
But yeah, so I was doing so the theater fell a little bit to the wayside while I was at college, but I picked it up again within months of graduation. And
going to say you graduated and then suddenly the next thing we all heard was, I'm going to New York to be an actor. And the first thing I thought was, you're just such a damn smart person. You won't have to wait tables. You've got a computer science area. So the only actor in New York that doesn't have to wait a table and ask if somebody wants fries for that.
Well, I got lucky with New York. And to be fair, that may have been the next thing you heard, but it was 5 years later.
Well, fair. Blink of an eye.
It didn't seem like 5 years.
Blink of an eye. It was a busy 5 years. Well, and what happened was in those 5 years, I was working mostly with a theater company in Boulder called the Upstart Crow. And I think in those 5 years, I did probably 15 shows with them, something like that.
Yeah.
So the playwriting is a lateral move because I was doing so much theater. And my mom, of course, is a writer, and short stories, novels, and also plays. So
I don't think I knew that your mom was a writer of plays. So
yeah. Actually, these days she's doing a lot of short plays. There's Denver right now has a lot of sort of these 10-minute play contests or short plays or one act play festivals, and she's got a lot of material.
This is a heads up for anybody that might be listening in Denver. Jump on in there, go play.
Jump in there for plays, and look up Linda Berry. She is
awesome. We will link her, by the way, of all of these exciting things I track down and try to find links to put on our pages afterwards. So
lovely.
Delighted. So did you ever read any texts or book? I mean, there's a gazillion how to write stories, this, that, and the other. The only book on writing a play I've run into is Carol Wolf's, and we had the good fortune to interview her on another episode. So did you read any how-to or scholarly works on this is how you do a play script? Or
no. As with so many things, it was bootstrapping. And if you got into computers when I did, my degree's in electrical engineering because when I started there was no degree in computer science. There was, like, the year after I went to school there was, and for some reason that's kind of the story of my life in a lot of ways, is I decide to do something and it's not right there, so I end up having to figure out how to do it on my own, which can be rewarding, but is also enormously exhausting and can be dreadfully frustrating.
Yes, one has seen now that you can go online and download Microsoft Word and a bunch of other things, have the ability to say, here is the script format, just start typing and it will automatically format things for you. So do you use any of those tools now, or do you still do it the old-fashioned way of, right?
Text editing in VI. No, that's not true. No.
Emacs sucks.
Emacs is for losers. Yeah, if you can't do it in VI, it doesn't need to be done. But no, I do not have any of the schmancy tools, And part of the reason why I've never bothered with that too much is most of the plays that I've written are, for my sins, iambic pentameter blank verse. So the
So
formatting
you fell over a Shakespeare best works of once hit your head, never came back out?
something like that. It was a combination of a couple of things. One is the restricted structure of working in a verse play form is perversely liberating, because you really have to dial in what it is that you're trying to do.
No,
To make
I've
it-
heard that. Yeah, I've heard that said quite a bit, actually, that not just about iambic pentameter, but about any form, that it's easier to be creative if you have some structure first.
Yeah, and it's the same with any sort of writing, I find, at least. I mean, even if I'm just writing straight fiction, you have to have, there's those fundamental choices that you have to make, right? Is this first person? Is it third person? Third person omniscient? First person omniscient, writing as God?
Oh, don't get Jeannie started.
Jeannie only writes in
So-
first person omniscient?
No,
So much to
no.
say.
Jeannie has many opinions on person and point
And the
of view,
gays,
and
I mean, I say it so often, but if you've never read Kate Elliott's essay on omniscient breasts, go thou after we finish here and go read it right away, because it's magnificent.
oh, great! I got her started. Oh,
Yes, duly noted.
N.K. Jemisin has been playing with second person. Takes a little to get used to, but similarly, was it Charles Strauss, if you remember,
Charlie Strauss, yeah.
has some second person.
Yeah. Well, and tense. Are we writing in past? Are we writing in the historical past? Are we writing in present tense? These are all decisions about structure. And
Or it's not a decision and you just have to do a lot of editing.
Yeah. If you don't make that decision, you pay for it down the line.
Yes, you're not my real mom. God damn it.
or your readers pay for it down the line.
Yes, that's right. What's the old joke about? It's probably not about Ulysses, but it might as well be. Yeah, which is to say, why should I make it easy? It was hard to write. It should be hard to read.
I believe that. I entirely believe that.
It was said, I've suffered for my art. Now it's your turn.
Now it's your turn. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
So you just
that
open
sounds
up,
like Stephen Wright, but yeah.
so you just open up a VI editor, new files start going, or have you ever tried any of the tools like Scrivener or some of the other bits of organizing
No.
your thoughts for writing?
No, I have broken down and will use a modern word processor.
I won't
But-
tell anybody. It's
I know.
by the way, WordPerfect is not a modern word processor, just in case you
I no longer use WordPerfect.
Good on you, mate.
But actually started on something called WordStar.
WordStar,
Oh,
tell
yeah.
us about it.
Yeah. Well, it was available for, oh God, DOS 2.1, something like that. Showed up in my parents' house in 1981, something like that.
I think I've used that.
Yeah. Well, my handwriting was so dreadful. I was typing and word processing my schoolwork by the time I was in 6th or 7th grade. It was the only way people could read it. But
So,
yes,
I was
I open up a word processor and start.
Are you a pantser then, or a plotter? You're sounding like a pantser a little bit.
Well, the real problem is, for me, is that I'm good at character, I'm good at setting, and especially for drama, it's handy, I'm good at dialogue. Not so good at plot. So some of the most successful stuff, or some of the stuff that's been the most fun at least, is where I've got it's sort of an adaptation. I mean, the most recent probably the most recent play I wrote was the Vita Sancti Margaritae, it was an adaptation of the life of Saint Margaret for a production which was all about dragons that was being done up in York. And Saint Margaret has dragons. So I had source material. It was great.
Well, Saints Marg and Rita are revered all over the planet, really.
Indeed they are. And as well they should be. We celebrate the feast day of Saint Burrito of Ely most Wednesdays.
That's fair.
And Marguerite and Saints Marge and Rita play a significant role in that celebration.
What do you do when you get kind of stuck? Like you've said, I have written the most magnificent reunion conversation between two old lovers, and it's going great, but now it's like, okay, now I need action of some kind. How do you fight your way through those moments of, okay, what do I have happen next? Do you outline a little for yourself, or do you?
That's the whole plotting problem. And that's and that's the problem. If I know where I'm going, I generally don't have any great difficulty getting there. It's
have you ever
problem.
Written the end first then?
Sometimes, or if not the end, certainly where I think it's going to go. I mean, you hear people talking about, oh, I didn't know where this, I just started writing it and I didn't know where it was going.
And the character started speaking to me.
Yeah, and all that. And in when I'm writing, if that's happening, it tends to be a digression, often an enormously entertaining digression, but it doesn't necessarily drive where the narrative arc ends up.
Right.
Do you end up leaving it in, or is it something you have to cut out later because it took you?
I am really bad at cutting out stuff that I think is funny. I find that
I feel you.
terribly difficult. Sometimes it has to go, but I hate that. I hate that.
I saw the line "kill your darlings," and then somebody said, "But don't kill everyone else's darlings." Don't.
Yeah. Well, and that's and it's a good point. Is if you really fall in love with something, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's any good.
Yes.
Right, or that it's, even if it is good, that it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Or that it fits whatever work you're doing.
Yeah, fits, I believe. I'm not particularly worried about being inappropriate most of the time.
Well, I don't mean that in the sense of politically correct or something. I just mean.
Yeah. No, there's some times where you look at something and it just doesn't move the story along, or it doesn't. And back to the drama. I was talking or commenting the other day about stage combat, because I also did a lot of fight direction when I was working with the theater company in Boulder, and then we started a theater company in New York, and I did all the fights for that and all that. And even now, watching fights, a good stage fight or movie fight or whatever, right? It tells you something about the character, and it ideally should also move the plot along. Otherwise, it's just explosions, right? So
from your mouth to Michael Bay's ears, man.
Well, I'm not going to name and shame, mind you. Yeah. But if you watch a good, well-designed stage fight, it drives the plot. And it tells you something about the people who are fighting. It tells you something about the character. Does this person fight very cautiously, and are they a counterpuncher? Well, is that appropriate for the character?
I entirely agree. I've always felt there is one of the most important fight scenes of all of plays and literature is Tybalt versus Mercutio.
Absolutely.
It changes everything. You have blah, blah, some farce about romance and teenagers that aren't getting enough sleep to, holy crap, somebody's dead.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we actually have a reason for all the rest of it to happen.
Right. And Tybalt is the swordsman, and he's confident, and he feels like he knows what he's doing, and everybody in the world of the play talks about, oh my God, he's the dude. If that doesn't come across in the fight, then you're losing something. You've missed a trick.
Yeah.
The fight should set up, and everybody should think that Tybalt's going to win, because he should.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. So what happens?
Yeah.
Not so much doesn't against Mercutio, but that whole Romeo stabbing him, blah blah blah.
Right.
Whenever I do it, Tybalt trips on something.
That's fair, because I have this brilliant offense. Goddamn gopher holes.
Yeah, basically, it's goofy Romeo. Goofy Romeo beats Tybalt, the badass of the town.
Does Romeo get in a lot of fights? No, he follows around love poetry, flowers, women.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's true.
So, but one of the things, one of the reasons why I tend to work with a lot of verse plays is I also tend to restrict myself, in the verse plays in particular, but in playwriting in general, to very, very few stage directions.
Oh, yeah?
There's this old, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's something like in all of Shakespeare's work, there are 42 stage directions.
Yeah.
Something like that. Enter, exit, exeunt, they fight, he dies, pursued by a bear, alarums.
That 42, that seems, aside from being a very auspicious number, of course, seems like almost impossibly low.
Well, I don't know. There was, in Carol, if you remember back, Dave, Carol Wolf talked about this, and she said the difference of having it in a play is all of the action and activity has to be in the words. I can't, in a movie script, I can say, we see Dave sitting there drinking his tequila straight from the bottle. He pours it over. It pours.
You said you wouldn't tell.
But you see that because that's written into the movie script, whereas I don't have that luxury in a play script. So it has to be, all of my activity has to be right there in the words.
And when people would submit us scripts, because we had a new play reading series with our theater company in New York, and a lot of times people would submit us scripts that were not play scripts. They were clearly movie scripts for that sort of reason. And you can get that kind of detail in a play script if you want. Try reading George Bernard Shaw, for instance.
Tragically have read a great deal of George Bernard Shaw.
And if you have, I'm sure you can remember things where, and Act 1, Scene 1, left bracket. Let me describe the set to you. Let me describe what everyone's wearing. Let me describe everything you ever need to know about the character for 4 pages before we have a line of dialogue.
So a bit of a control freak, you're saying?
Well, yes. And my high school drama teacher, I think he was talking about a Pinter script that we were reading for one class somewhere, said that when you read a Pinter script, he doesn't trust actors.
Or the director, clearly.
Well, or the director. But, and if you read Elizabethan Jacobean drama in general, it is all in the dialogue, which means that as an actor, you have to not only learn your lines, but you need to pay attention to what everyone else is saying, because it is entirely possible that what you're supposed to be doing is actually in the lines of the people who are before you. Why do you come here so hurriedly? Oh, I guess I should pay attention to that and come on hurriedly. Shouldn't I? So I very consciously, when I was starting to work with verse plays, was restricting myself to extremely minimal stage direction as well, which again tends to force you into it's stylized, sure, but that very structure helps to focus the mind,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Well, again, another way to, I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking, another way to think about that whole structure fosters creativity is, from a technical standpoint, you're narrowing the search space to something manageable, right? If you
Sure.
think of it as that sort of problem.
Yeah. Well, and with any sort of writing, I mean, sometimes, sure, sometimes inspiration strikes and you go, oh, great, I've got X many words of absolutely brilliant whatever is just going to pour out of me, blah, onto the page. Great.
Well, and I also have a theory on the success of one play versus another. And this is one that I've been sort of contemplating as I watch. I've seen a number of forgettable plays and I've seen some very successful plays. Somewhere in there is something witty or snarky or clever. And it's that little combination, those bon mots, if you will, that sort of is what is missing out of it people's everyday lives, because there's a lot of people that I've known that have never really said anything particularly witty or clever, but they wish they had. And so literature and plays and books give them that, oh man, if I'd known that, I could have said that last week to that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, well, and you're kind of touching on a point that somebody else, and I forget who it was, and I'm not going to get the phrasing exactly right, but it was somebody talking about drama, because although I have not read necessarily anything about playwriting specifically, I have read stuff about writing plays, if you see the distinction. And one of the points that somebody was making is part of a critique of sort of this day in the life, slice of life sort of style of drama or whatever. And they pointed out, that's not interesting. We don't want to see just a day in your life. We want to see an important day in your life, or the most important day in your life.
Or even in flash fiction, it might be a day in your life in less than 500 words that has some sort of quirk that makes you go, oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
or,
well,
Well, if it isn't extraordinary, it isn't a story. Or
well, yeah.
isn't.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a joke, and sometimes it's just sketch comedy, and that's fine too. Yeah, and sometimes you're right. Sometimes it really is just that moment. I was talking with some friends the other day in a different context, and one of them. So this is all text-based, and somebody wrote that Best Neighbor ran a restaurant and therefore still had their restaurant contacts to get flour, which I don't know if this is a problem for y'all.
Yes. We are, this podcasting in the time of cholera, yes, almost every store, we now know when the trucks arrive, because that's the only time you can get flour or hair dye, apparently.
Yeah, flour, toilet roll, canned beans, hand sanitizer, and for a while, tonic water.
And let's remember, for those of you that are not aware, Jeff is over in England right now. So
Indeed.
Without the gin and tonics, I think the entire English nation might just, collapse.
Well, I think
here you are using gin as cleaning fluid, but we'll
that's
skip over that.
an antipathy and allergy towards juniper here.
Yes, well, but I think the tonic was because that rumor was floating around that anti-malarials were effective.
Oh,
and so suddenly there was a run on tonic water.
Yes.
Terrific.
But so my friend said, oh yes, she had this contact who could get the industrial quantities of flour. And so her friend was now running a black market flour business on the side.
Hot.
because she could get French strong flour, not Canadian, because a lot of the strong baking flour over here is Canadian wheat for some reason. So, okay, fine. So I banged out 800 words about a back alley flour deal because it was funny.
Because it is funny.
Because it is funny. And, sliced it up into 6 bits and stuck it on Twitter because they said, oh, this is funny. You should stick it on Twitter. Yeah, okay.
All right. So I am actually going to go and put links to the hilarious Jeff on Twitter and a few other sites where he's been known to sound off with snarkaliciousness, as well as stories, if I can find copies of your old SCA satire.
They are all linked up.
Beautiful.
I can send you links.
I want links, and we will put all these links on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can find Jeff and us both on Twitter. Writers Drinking Coffee is on Facebook. We love emailing questions, and we will have Jeff answer anything for you. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre McGaffey-Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider and occasional host is Dave Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Engberg. You can hear more from Michael Engberg on manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsor is Jackal Designs, a lovely woman who enables you to buy all cool WDC swag, including our new Red Coffee is the Best Coffee and All You Need is a Plan quote t-shirts. And thanks for listening.